Hello everyone, thanks for joining us this morning for our webinar with Bruce Maynard on no-kill cropping, stress-free stockmanship and self-herding. This event is supported by Lottery West and the Department of Water and Environmental Regulation through their Soil Wars program. My name is Bonnie Jupp and I am the RegenWA Program Manager here at Perth NRM. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands we're all zooming in from today and pay our respects to the cultural elders of the past, present and emerging, and acknowledge their spiritual connection to country. So we're very excited to have the current Bob Hawke Award Winner for Excellence in Sustainable Agriculture, Bruce Maynard, joining us today. For over 30 years, Bruce has pioneered the fields of no-kill cropping, stress-free stockmanship, self-herding and grassland grain. So we're really keen to dive into those topics today and provide an opportunity for you to ask any questions. If you do have questions, pop them in the chat box at the bottom and we'll go through them at the end. With all of that, I'll hand over to Bruce to get started on his presentation. Thank you.
Welcome to Pioneering New Pathways, an online webinar for RegenWA, presented by Bruce Maynard. I am pleased to talk to you today about a range of different methods, practices, principles and processes that we can use to achieve triple bottom line results that give us a future that is both desirable and plentiful. So I was very, very fortunate to be awarded the Bob Hawke Award by Landcare for excellence in sustainable agriculture. And that individual award was really the culmination of 3.5 decades of support, advice, knowledge and goodwill from many, many people. And it's in that vein that I enjoy extending my work throughout Australia with as many people as possible, because I believe that we can take an active role and make positive futures for ourselves. And today's presentation is just about that, a quick overview and a brief little bit of a taste on a range of different things that we can really get some exciting new and different results than the standard. In order to progress and provide a positive future for ourselves, it's always important to realise some of the constraints that affect us all. Soil and the agriculture that's practiced upon it is a bedrock foundation of everything that we enjoy in our societies today. And the continuation of that is really reliant upon us finding creative ways that make sure that we can continue into the long term. So that is with a triple bottom line approach, that it can't just be about the environment, nor just about economics, nor just about people, but actually a positive combination of them all. And realizing that some of our existing practices are not actually beneficial for all three legs of that important foundation. And so today is about looking at the risks and challenges, but importantly, being creative and forging a new and different path forward. The task of progress will never stop. I don't really actually ever believe in best management practice. I always believe there's always a better management practice to come along. If we have our eyes wide open to what we can implement, however large or small, there's always improvement every day. And I believe that it's important to continue to extend things that are helpful formulas and principles so that people can work out their own answers rather than being told how to think. What we'll cover today is quite a wide range of topics, not to any great depth because time doesn't allow, but it is an integration and a little bit of a sample feeling of how you can very beneficially start to incorporate many different pieces to get a larger result, and therefore design a habitat for yourself and coming generations that is both plentiful and desirable. Before we start moving on to some of the answers that might be applied, a brief look at the challenges that we face not only locally, regionally, nationally, but also globally. And on the right-hand side of this slide, you have the top 10 global risks as ranked by the World Economic Forum. It's not intended to be looked at depth other than to easily see that agriculture directly affects 5 of the 10 major threats that they have identified. That's the opportunity, not the threat or thinking that it is terrible that the responsibility comes with us engaged in farming practices, but in fact our great chance to actually be something that's deeply worthwhile for all of society while we engage in our businesses and activities over the top. What an opportunity, what an enthusiastic thing to be able to put forward to young people to engage in our industry to say, yes, we have global problems, but agriculture is the place to be to really solve them. In order to even contemplate going towards a different future, one needs to quickly just reflect on where are current systems taking us. So since the Second World War, these trends have heightened and increased by reducing our landscape diversity of animals, plants and other organisms. Our country communities across the world have declined. Rural vigour in terms of communities has reduced. Profitability across agricultural industries has declined also. The clearest sign of that is, of course, how many people are engaged in those enterprises. There's a declining number of farmers everywhere, and that is the surest sign that we have declining profitability rather than increasing profitability. And meanwhile, the amount of nutrients across a wide range of measures has been declining in the foods that we're providing to our consumers. So all of this is simplification outcomes from existing systems. We need to reverse those trends in order to have better landscapes, better communities, much better profitability, and a better end product for people eating our stuff. So in order to do that, we've got to change the two arrows that are increasing, which is the external inputs, especially non-renewables. We need to drastically reduce those, and also not just have a focus on productivity of base level commodities, rather go for quality produce. And by having this sort of an attitude, you become consumer focused, but also you reverse the other 4 trends. So here today is about creative ways that have addressed those mega trends and put them into reverse. In order to have an effect when economics and the terms of trade continue to work in the long run, just the same way that inflation does, we need to continue to produce more value off any piece of land economically. But how can one do that if the only game in town is scaling outwards? The old get big or get out maxim from the 1970s Nixon era. So instead of scaling outwards, think about scaling upwards. And the way to scale upwards without adding intensity to your operation is to scale upwards with plants. So starting to use various layers, as you can see in the picture there, of many different types of plants and at different levels. So thinking about perennials, biennials, annuals, shrub layers and tree layers as well. Whatever you can add in there that works in synergy to continue to grow the production. It doesn't have to be an either or, that putting in a new element needs to take away from your existing elements. In any landscape, one can start to think about what can we add in there that starts to add spice to the variety of production. The photo in the slide here is some of the various patterns that we've instituted across our property. We've put in spirals, concentric circles, concentric squares, herringbones, triangular shapes, many different types of configurations and at varying levels of density. So that is part of the full considerations, not just whether a certain species of tree or shrub or plant that one puts in the landscape is a good or a bad thing. It's how much, where is it, where's it directed to, how's it shaped across the landscape, how can it fulfill a role for you guys that enhances what you're already doing and in fact adds a multiplication factor of production across your property rather than just replacing an element that was there prior. We have a bit of film here of no-kill cropping in action as an example of what can be done with layering in the landscape. That is, adding more layers on top of an existing grassland system. So here the tractor is drawing through with an air seeder, in this case sowing a winter cereal crop into a diverse grassland, providing the opportunity to go cropping without losing the grazing opportunity through that field and maintaining the full continual fertility replacement and replenishment that happens in natural grasslands. A great example of keeping landscape function while still getting agricultural production across the top of the land. As we go forward in the future, we have to still produce food for a large human population, but in a way that doesn't use a lot of external inputs, as few as possible. Also, we need to reinstate natural functions on the grasslands right around the world, because essentially mankind has marched across the grasslands, replacing them with monocultures of crops. And where possible, we need to reinstate those full functions for catchment health, for the general biodiversity health, but also for the global issues such as climate change. This enterprise can be added on top of what's existing on a whole farm basis. It's not instead of. So whatever people are doing on that property there at the moment, they can add no-kill on the top. No-kill cropping has 5 main principles, and number 1 is sowing dry. This is the main reason that no-kill works. It gives the plant that we're planting the head start on growth. So when moisture comes, it gets a head start ahead of the weeds that are, or any other plants that are in alongside it. It's advantaged. So that's the only advantage it gets, but it's an important one, and that's enough. Number 2 is straight running coulter equipment to place the seed in the ground. We have double disc units which run straight through
the grass sward cutting rather than dragging. We're not about disturbing soil, because what we want to do is place the seed in the soil with the minimum disturbance. These sort of units do that quite effectively. The seed delivery mechanism above it can be very, very cheap. Old machinery will do. So it's matching new with old.
Number 3 is no chemicals or herbicides used at all, and the reason for that is that we don't want to simplify anything that's there. We want the full grassland there. We want every possible plant and combination of plant, which gives us every possible combination of insect and animal that will thrive on that area.
It's important to see and recognise that we are dealing with a lot of components here. It's not just the crop itself, but we've got a full range of other plants mixed in here because we've been able to retain everything. And if we didn't sow the crop at all, we'd get this sort of a result here where whatever wanted to grow in this pasture would, but we can actually get extra by planting our desirable plants in there without damaging what we already have.
Number 4 is no fertiliser. The same reason as number 3, we don't want to simplify the grassland by over advantaging some species rather than others. Part of that principle too is that it's not using external resources, finite resources. We need to keep the costs of our enterprise down low. No-kill cropping must be done cheaply or it won't be an option. And the 5th principle is good grazing management. I'm talking about grazing management that provides the adequate rest and recovery for a full sward of plants, particularly perennial plants, to thrive under those conditions, and returns enough nutrients from the animals as evenly as possible over the whole landscape.
This is a test plot between 2 tree areas, unsown to no-kill cropping, near Perengery, WA, and showing you what it's grown over the winter. So you can see it's a pretty hard and challenged site. Now we'll go and have a look at the no-kill option applied in these same places right beside this. So same soil type, same conditions, and this has had a mix of wheat, barley and oats sown, and look at the difference. Once again, we'll show you, you could have that or this by applying no-kill. When we look down closely, we've still got an assemblage of what was already there, but we've added considerable biomass. This is a way to feed the world in our arid lands. This is what is possible from ground that doesn't grow much at the moment. We apply no-kill cropping. This is a breakthrough crop production system that can help feed the world and help climate change by storing more carbon above and below the ground. This extra material has come at very limited cost.
It's a really important point to note about no-kill cropping is that it's adding to everything all the time. It's not subtracting. All other cropping methods, to one degree or another, take away some of the diversity that's there. And so here are a couple of photos that you can see straight immediately after harvest that there's all the growth happening underneath the crop on the right. On the left-hand side, where the dog is running along, is an area that's unsown. So you can decide to either have the crop or not in a grassland there, but it shows the additional amount of growth that one can achieve over the top of an existing grassland if you just choose to engage with no-kill cropping. Some videos here of harvesting in different years with no-kill crops. And so one of the things that's immediately apparent is the incredible diversity that's still left in the fields. You've got all the components that were growing there in that field still left on site and undisturbed to regrow. And meanwhile, you are still able to reap what are commercially very attractive yields, because the cost base of putting that in has been so low, and you've increased the total biomass that's grown across that paddock quite considerably. So it's a practical, doable and achievable way of us maintaining grasslands across vast areas of our planet instead of having to replace them to grow crops. A really, really exciting development for the long term, and it allows us to reinstate landscape processes that have been taken away in the past. The products from grassland grain are wide and varied because the attributes of the materials are much more diverse than standard agricultural products that have been produced in a simplified monocultural way. You actually have higher values that can be used, such as on the left, where the grains have been malted to be used in beer products, to the right, which is actually a graw bale harvested out of the paddock. It's not a grass bale, it's not a straw bale, it's a combination of the two, hence the name given to it. It's a graw bale, and that's what's available to you to reap as an additional product off that field after a harvest has gone through. So off any field you are getting grazing values, cropping values, additional fodder, and the end grain products are also so diverse to be able to exhibit local provenance, which gives them a higher value potentially than standard commodity grains. And where's the end point for lots of no-kill stuff? Gets really serious now, because it can end up in beer bottles. It can end up being used by artisan bakers, and with also the opportunity to start to implement the growth of ancient and heritage varieties of grains and different species of cereal grains in amongst grasslands, all of which are going to exhibit much different characteristics than if they were just grown as a monoculture. Really, really great sets of possibilities for people wishing to get a higher value for their grain from something very particularly special. Each area, region and farm will grow different things if you grow your crops in diverse circumstances. If you grow them in conventional ways that limit the diversity that's in the field, the products will be more limited in their scope and what they show for the consumer out the other end. Changing right away from cropping now to discuss some of the animal behavioural work that I've been involved in for over 25 years now, and starting with level 3 stress-free stockmanship livestock behavioural adaptation. So this is a follow-on from the levels 1 and 2 that some people may be aware of. Level 1 being humane livestock handling, which is some of the work that Temple Grandin and others inspired from there, and level 2 is of course the work that Bud Williams pioneered with low stress stock handling. So stress-free stockmanship is higher level 3 competencies, where we take the interaction of people to really change the way that animals handle anxiety and stressors into the future. Some of the performance results have been nothing short of startling over the years, where we've been able to raise production figures by more than a third, as one example, eliminate bruising from transport of cattle, and other associated increases, including 15% increases in reproduction. So a wide variety of things that we've been able to do, and including some really exciting different work which led into the development of self-herding, which we will discuss on our next slide. So changing animal anxiety levels by utilising active de-stressing methods, which are part of the level 3 competencies, you can actually start to get animals to eat weeds that they wouldn't be eating prior to that, even if they've had plenty of experience with those plants previously. It's exciting work, and that starts to change the whole basis of everything that goes on, because if animals start to widen the range of their dietary experiences, then that starts to change the genome and their physiology immediately today for successive generations that are then better adapted to utilise that landscape. Exciting work, and that can be found if you look up stress-free stockmanship on YouTube. Self-herding is the level beyond stress-free stockmanship, co-developed by myself and Dr. Dean Revell over more than a decade now. The results of this work enable us to change what animals eat, where they go, where they stay, and indeed how they impact the environment that they're in, whether it be small paddocks or large station areas. If we actively take a role in directing the animals toward things that they choose to do, which we are indicating, then we get totally different outcomes than if it is just left to their devices, where they repeat habitual behaviours. So by changing their habits, we change everything and the whole landscape effects that come from livestock. So how do we actually get animals to self-herd towards places where we want them to go to and away from other positions in the landscape? We do this by pairing signals with rewards. Importantly for you to understand, we are not just using the rewards as the basis to take them around the landscape. We're actually pairing sight, sound and smell signals to initiate addictive behaviours. So the animals are going to the places that we indicate by the same attraction that lures people that have addictive behaviours into doing repeated actions. And it's so by utilising this, as seen in this little bit of film here, we get animals to come out from the areas that we would not be able to draw them out from except using this method. So self-herding has a range of different possibilities, and the reason for that is that behaviour overlays everything. By changing habits, we can change the way they interact with us and the landscape. These two sets of videos show animals in the Gascoyne region of WA being called out from the scrub to come and impact on a scalded area. You'll note that in the second video, which is right at ground level, you can see that the small amounts of oats has been applied on the ground, but the excitement is clearly there much over and above just the attraction of the oats itself. So the animals are excitedly coming to this area. They're being drawn to this spot by the anticipation of reward, not so much the reward itself anymore. So we're able to utilise animals' hooves here to start the process of disturbance on a site to enable plants and other biology to start to colonise that site and repair it. So it's a great example of being able to use self-herding for landscape repair. We're actually using the cow power here in a very targeted and distinct manner to get a result that one couldn't get otherwise. And so very, very exciting possibilities here for all sorts of applications across the landscape to start repairing with animals and repairing as they go around the landscape. Some examples to show you of rehabilitation works using animals and herd effect in particular via self-herding to batter down and start repair processes on the tops of gullies. So this project was the Fixing the Zippers project in WA, and some various different examples here. On the right hand side, a before and then after example there, and on the left hand side a place where they've actually brought some extra material in and then utilised the animals to batter down the beginning part of a gully head that was eating up into the associated area. So really, really exciting prospects here, and will be a useful method into the future if applied well and with very, very targeted possibilities to do this over really wide ranges where one couldn't afford to either do mechanical intervention or if it was inappropriate anyway. So some really wonderful examples of what can be done with self-herding. We turn now to two slides giving some examples of the greatest threat that is posed to any regenerative or restorative or sustainable ag in agricultural areas, and that is the effect of passive chemical exposures being experienced across wide areas. It's a well-known and established fact that broadacre chemical sprays are able to travel through landscapes in excess of 50 kilometres. Some of them have been known to go as far as 100 kilometres or even more. So this has an impact everywhere in that there are repeated micro doses of poisons travelling through the air columns and settling in various different places. And what is evident by the vegetation through our ag areas is that this impact has been increasing in frequency and severity, and the difficulty for all of us is that this now is a problem for all of us in that we are all being exposed to an accumulation of doses of unknown toxicity levels, quantities and repeatedness. So I flag this as something for you to be aware of now and to start to get your eyes in for the vegetation decline that is happening very progressively and increasingly, but it's a little bit like a death of 1,000 cuts. So like the Dr. Seuss character, the Lorax says, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. The huge challenge that passive chemical exposures are to all of our food production systems and indeed our survival out in agricultural rural areas is but one of the larger challenges that we do have and face with increased social expectations from people not directly associated with our industry but reliant upon our industry, and also the global challenges of species decline and climate change. So with all that being taken in as realities, it doesn't mean that we should try and denigrate the factual science behind those natural phenomena that we can see in our landscapes, nor should we be so overwhelmed by the increasing amount of substance behind these observations, but grasp those opportunities for us to be part of the solution rather than to argue about the problem or the challenge. And I think that once again is something that we can all creatively go and take. There are many indicators in our landscape of increased biodiversity and vegetation loss, particularly in agricultural areas. And I believe that we shouldn't close our eyes or argue against that, rather recognise this is true and something observable, but then take different paths to actually get a better and different result for ourselves. So that is the encouraging part that I would put forward to all of you, that we do have opportunities to start to forge towards a different pathway. In the end, what really matters? What really matters to you? What really matters to me? What really matters to everyone? In the end, it's people, 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 and inspiring the next generations with what we're doing now and the direction that we are taking. So if regeneration is about anything, it's about the next generation and those that follow. What a wonderfully incredible time to be living, where we can actually do positive things that change our pathways towards those that really enable and constructively make a huge increase in both desirability and diversity across our landscapes. It is up to us, but isn't that the fun part to put forward? So a short review on pioneering new pathways towards a future that is both desirable and plentiful for us all. These points are fundamental to what we've been talking about, that if we keep on bringing more diversity of plants to our farms and our landscapes, then every new plant brings different nutrients to the soil surface from different depths and in different concentrations and at different times, so that all of that means that we are enhancing the whole inherent circulation and recirculation of nutrient availability and fertility across our ground if we keep on encouraging diversity. And this diversity also brings a stability and resilience by broadening out the pyramid of organisms that support your production system, so thereby giving a much greater stability than narrowing the number of organisms that you are reliant upon. And part of that is managing animals, whether they be livestock or wild animals across your landscapes. It isn't just a set and forget and leave them to their own devices, because if we do, we know behaviourally animals will act like us as creatures of habit, and because of that, then areas in our landscape will be over and underutilised. So we have an active role in here, and for 47,000 years we've had humans on this continent taking an active role in its management. That is the creative role that we can aspire to forward from here as well. And by doing this, the well-being for ourselves personally and as groups is enhanced with varied vegetation. There are so many psychological studies now that show that we benefit from seeing a wide variety of plants across our landscape, which then support a whole heap of other diversity, from birds to the bees to the larger organisms around us. And agriculture has this foundational place to actually increase that rather than degrade it. We can actually make it larger, and it's such an exciting time to be in agroecology and working on positive methods that can give us all a sustainable future. I have been very fortunate on my journey to be involved in a number of very beneficial, new and innovative projects and themes, and indeed even new fields of scientific endeavour. And some of those are listed here on the page. They can all be accessed via the Ag Toolshed platform, which will be live very soon on the internet. So that will be the agtoolshed.com.au, and you can start to utilise some of the tools on there for free, or also go inside the shed for some deep dive where you'll become a member.